Brian Flores is out for us as a defensive coordinator. Reports late yesterday he is going to sign a contract extension with Minnesota if he doesn't get a head coaching job. So if he misses out on the Pittsburgh job or the Raiders job or any other head coaching job, Brian Flores will return to Minnesota as the defensive coordinator with a new contract. Washington also has requested and will interview Al Harris for their defensive coordinator position. John Keim's going to jump on with us in about 20 minutes to update us on all things defensive coordinator search and more. Brad Johnson will join us at 11 a.m. You know, Brad had an experience early in his career where he was asked to come in for the great Warren Moon. He wasn't replacing Bo Nix like Jarrett Stidham is doing this weekend, and it wasn't for an NFC championship game, but it was for a very good football team that had a very good record midway through the season. We'll talk to Brad about, how you get buy-in from the rest of the team as a backup quarterback getting ready to play for the first time, because that was really Brad's first experience in being a starter. We can talk to him about both games, have him preview both as well. It's been a while since we've had Brad on the show. What a year he had in 1999 for our team. And if they don't bring in Jeff George in 2000, I think he probably has another really good season, and they're probably a playoff team in back-to-back years. Brad Johnson at 11 a.m. I will, as these models come in this morning, I will, at the end of the show, because at the end of the show, we'll have the latest American model run, and we should have part of the Euro run. And so at the end of the show, I'll give you a snow update. As of now, most of you know, this is coming. Like, this isn't going to miss us. This is going to be a massive storm from Texas to New England, and we're going to get a lot of snow. The issue is, in the DMV, how much snow versus, ice, sleet primarily, not really freezing rain unless you're well south and east of the city, but how much of that ice mixes in to sort of suppress, if you will, the overall totals. The potential is for a foot or more in most places, and maybe a lot more than a foot if it stays all snow. But the forecast is always changing with each of these model runs. We'll get Doug Kammerer hopefully on the show tomorrow. I don't want to bother him again today. We had him on 2 days ago. We'll get him on tomorrow with sort of the last forecast for our show going into the weekend. But this is going to be a big deal, and I think I've mentioned this, and Kammerer mentioned it the other day with us. It's going to be frigid after this storm for a while. We go into really one of the more unprecedented runs after a big storm of brutally cold weather. I'm talking about single digits at night, pretty much across the board. There will be places next week that approach 0 degrees at night. And it's going to be here for a while. And there are other storms on the long range. So we're in the midst of winter. We don't always get winter around here. I say that. Of course we get winter, but we don't always get harsh winters. Last winter, even though we only had, I think, 7 inches of snow in one storm, it stuck around for more than a month because it was so cold. And we've got like a real stretch of deep down, brutal, long days, actually short days still. They're getting longer. They start to get longer at about December 9th, December 10th, something like that. But anyway, I'll have, because I watch them right here, I'll give you the latest on what the models are saying at the end of the show. But seriously, this is going to be a good one if you're into it. And if you're not, it's going to be something you should prepare for. For those that don't like it and hate it, but in all seriousness, have medication needs and all that stuff, you know what to do. You gotta prepare for a few days at least. We're not the South where we'll be shut down for weeks, and this isn't going to be a pure ice storm. There is some concern about some freezing rain, and that would suck because that's the stuff that really makes it not fun. Power outages. Nobody wants that. More on that coming up at the end of the show. So I got this from my guy Yale yesterday. Yale wrote, "You loved Brandon Ayuk. He's available now. Do you still want him?" So for those that missed the news yesterday, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan had their season-ending press conference, I guess a week after they lost to the Eagles. But they held it yesterday in Santa Clara at their headquarters. And John Lynch said, quote, "I think it's safe to say that he, Brandon Ayuk, has played his last snap with the Niners," closed quote. The Brandon Ayuk story started with an incredible breakout season in 2023, where he was a legitimate top 5, top 10 receiver. He was. Worst case, you'd have him right there after 2023 as a guy that's hovering around the top 10. And he needed a contract extension because he was entering the last year of his deal. And it set up this process, if you recall, in the offseason of 2024, summer of 2024, of a protracted contract extension negotiation that got ugly. It got contentious. It became public. He demanded a trade. Remember, part of that was, he, was communicating with his very good friend and teammate from Arizona State, Jaden Daniels, before Jaden had ever suited up for one NFL game, and he put out Washington's practice tape on social media. Jaden was just asking him for advice on something and sent him some of the tape, and he put it out there. I mean, he really became a bit of an off-putting figure over the summer of 2024, but that happens sometimes in these contract negotiations. And, more often than not, they come together, they get a deal done, and all is well. Well, they did get a deal done. He signed a deal that summer, an extension worth $120 million, nearly $80 million guaranteed. And then the 2024 season started, and because he had missed a lot of the summer offseason camp, et cetera, he started off slowly. It wasn't the same guy from 2023. It didn't mean that it wasn't going to become the same guy from 2023, but he never had that chance because he tore his ACL and MCL in a game in week 6, and he was done for the year. And the rehab, when it began okay, and then it became very strange. He stopped showing up for rehab. The 49ers reached out, and this was, during the offseason of 2025, a year ago, as he was supposed to be showing up to the facility, rehabbing. He wasn't. They were trying to communicate with him. He wasn't returning calls. He basically went AWOL. And they decided to void $27 million worth of guarantees on his near $80 million guaranteed deal. Kyle Shanahan said about the last time he talked to Brandon Ayuk, he said, I can't remember when it was. It officially stopped in terms of the communication for me when I tried to get a hold of him and couldn't, then tried a couple more times and still couldn't. And then that matched everybody else in the organization trying to get in touch with him, and nobody else could. And eventually, there's not much of an explanation because it's really hard for us and anyone else to understand what's going on, why it's something that he's doing. There was an encounter during a practice before the 2024 season where he showed up in the wrong colored workout, practice uniform, and Kyle sent him out, and that may have been the spark that pissed him off somehow. Nobody really knows. Kyle said yesterday, quote, "I've never seen in 22 years of coaching something like this. It's unfortunate. It's confusing. But it eventually becomes, it is what it is," closed quote. John Lynch said, yeah, he's not taking another snap with the 49ers. In December, the 49ers placed him on the reserve left team list, which is usually a designation for retired players or temporarily stepping away from football players. But that, closed him down for the year, even though For all they knew, he had been fully rehabbed and may have been ready to play football for the 49ers as they were making a run for the 1 seed down the stretch. But that wasn't going to happen because he refused to communicate with them. This is, of course, what we've heard from the 49ers standpoint, but we've been hearing it for a while. So that is where it ended up. And $27 million in voided guarantees, and they're going to go after more of those guarantees. So back to Yale, my guy who emails me all the time about my desire for Brandon Ayuk during the offseason of 2024, the summer of 2024, when he was pushing for a trade to be reunited with Jaden Daniels before he got the long-term deal done. Remember, the Steelers were very aggressive going after Brandon Ayuk. The 49ers refused to trade him because he was sensational in 2023. And he was really their best receiver, not their best offensive player. That designation would go, or label would go to Christian McCaffrey or George Kittle or Trent Williams. Man, when you think about the 49ers of the last, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever it's been now, they have had true blue chip talent on their team, not to mention Bosa, Warner, Hufanga, etc. on the other side of the ball. But anyway, to answer, Yale, your question, there's no chance I want Brandon Ayuk now. I mean, there's just way too much, smoke. It's not just smoke. It is a raging red flag on this player. I mean, the darkest red you can come up with for the flag. So, no, I don't want Brandon Ayuk as good as he was in 2023. And the idea, at the time, things change, Yale. I mean, as you get more information, you can change your opinion. You can evolve and have a different thought. Yeah, I wanted Brandon Ayuk, teamed up with Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. Are you kidding me? But cost was always an issue. What was the contract going to look like? What were they going to have to give up compensation? All of that was part of the conversation. But no, I do not want Brandon Ayuk now. I mean, I guess it's possible that the story comes out, in a few weeks and, it's all on the Niners. Everything that happened was on San Francisco and they screwed it up somehow 7 ways to Sunday and Brandon Ayuk's the good guy. I doubt it. Because if just the bare minimum of we tried over and over again to communicate with him and he wouldn't return our calls, the agent wouldn't return our calls, that's just unprofessional. I mean, you're not going to solve problems by ignoring the conversation. So, no, I would not want Brandon Ayuk. And, by the way, we don't even know what his health status is, coming off not just an ACL, but an MCL as well. And it was meniscus issues as well. It was a severe knee injury. He may be done for all we know. But the way it appears from the outside looking in, no chance would I want Brandon Ayuk now. Something that came out yesterday, which I thought was very interesting because it's a revisit from 9 years ago. But Adam Schefter reported another subject, moving on from Ayuk, that Anthony Lynn is going to interview for the Buffalo head coach opening. He interviewed for that job and was considered one of the front runners in 2017, which was after his run in San Diego was over. I think they were still in San Diego. When did they move to LA? It was not 2017. They were still in San Diego, I think in 2017. It would be really interesting if Anthony Lynn got a head coaching job and Cliff Kingsbury didn't. Now, do I think Anthony Lynn's going to get that job in Buffalo? I don't. I think Brian Daboll's got a good chance to get that job in Buffalo. We shall see. Did we talk about Terry Pegula yesterday on the show, Max? I'm forgetting.
Very briefly, but I did want to play some of that audio from the presser yesterday.
So let me set it up for everybody. So Terry Pegula is the owner of the Buffalo Bills. Terry Pegula's daughter is Jessica Pegula. Jessica Pegula is the number 2 or number 3 women's tennis player in the world. I don't think she's won a major yet. She's been close. I don't think she's won a major. She had a big run at the U.S. Open in the fall. Let me also just give a little bit of context on the Pegulas. They're a big Penn State family. I mean, there are buildings all over Penn State with Pegula on it. I think the hockey rink is called the Pegula Center. The only reason I know that is my youngest went to Penn State, so I was up there several times, a few years back. And his wife, Kim, has been very sick on and off for now a several-year period. I think she had brain cancer and has been battling that for a long time. So this is a family and a husband-wife that have been through it, for the last few years. With that said, there are times in which you want to hear from the owner, especially if the owner is buttoned up and ready to roll and can communicate, like Steve Bisciotti was last week in Baltimore. And there are other times where it's best if the owner doesn't communicate, because it was a really rough day for Terry Pegula yesterday. First of all, he talked about why he fired Sean McDermott. And then he basically took the biggest bus you can find and put Keon Coleman behind it and rolled back over Keon Coleman, and then probably went forward and then rolled back over him again. Which soundbite from Pegula are you going to play first, Max?
Since you mentioned it, let's hit the Keon Coleman one.
Go.
Yeah,
Can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff, who felt strongly about the player. And, he's taken, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it. But I'm here to tell you the true story.
So just to be clear about something, no one asked about Keon Coleman. They asked Brandon Beane, the general manager, about whether or not he felt like he gave Sean McDermott enough in the receiver area. And the owner took the question and said, I'll handle that one. And then said, look, we really screwed up on Keon Coleman, but it wasn't Brandon's fault. It was the head coach's fault or the coaching staff's fault. They're the ones that pushed for this terrible player, for us to pick this terrible player. They're the one who blew this pick. Keon Coleman just finished his second year, by the way. You just can't, you can't make determinations. I know it has not been a smooth first 2 years for him, and he doesn't look the part, certainly, through 2 years. But that is one of those things where, oh my God, you just cringe, because you just can't, you can defend Brandon Beane without throwing a young 23-year-old, 24-year-old second-year player under the bus. Hopefully Keon Coleman's got some thick skin, because I can imagine his social media and his phone lit up. But I think even more interesting was the reason that he said he fired Sean McDermott. And the reason was that he walked into the locker room after the loss to Denver and saw how distraught everybody was, including Josh Allen, who was in tears. And he said that was the reason. He had never considered firing Sean McDermott until he walked into the locker room, and let's consider this, after a devastating overtime loss in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. That locker room probably looked nothing like any other locker room. Wrong. It looked like every other locker room after a devastating overtime loss in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, especially after you feel you got robbed on a call, which he then described the reason for the loss was a terrible call. So he had no inclination, no desire to fire Sean McDermott until he walked into the locker room, saw how distraught everybody was, and over losing the game because of a bad official's call, and then he blamed the coach for it. Bad day for Terry Pegula. Bless his heart, because I know that they've been through a lot as a family for a while. Man, Sean McDermott, and I think maybe we talked about this briefly yesterday, but this is a guy with what a 9-year track record he has. I mean, I went back and looked this up. His 9 years in Buffalo, all right, 98-50 in the regular season. That's a .662 win percentage. If you take out all of the coaches that are ahead of him, win percentage on the list, that have just coached a few years, and I just went with his 9 as a bare minimum. So if you've coached 9 years or more, he is 9th all-time in win percentage in the regular season. He went to the playoffs 8 years out of 9 seasons. The only one he didn't was Josh Allen's rookie year. Okay, you don't necessarily, more often than not, although we saw it last year with 2 teams, Denver and Washington, but with a rookie quarterback, more times than not, you don't go to the postseason in that rookie quarterback's first year. He didn't. That's the only season in 9 they didn't go to the postseason. They had missed the postseason in Buffalo 17 consecutive years before Sean McDermott showed up. Now, they were 8-8 in the postseason. They didn't get to the Super Bowl. They got to 2 AFC title games, and we know about the gut-wrenching losses in those playoff games. They were so close. This isn't a guy that was there so long that people just got tired of him. Tomlin, Harbaugh, sometimes it just runs its course. He'd have to double up those 9 years to reach the Tomlin and Harbaugh level. But I didn't realize until I looked it up yesterday just where he kind of stacks up all-time wins. Sure, he's had a phenomenal quarterback, but he took that quarterback over as a rookie. And remember, those first couple of years were a little bit up and down, to say the least. Nobody was convinced of Josh Allen the first 2 years, especially in that second year when they blew that big lead and lost to Houston in the playoff game. Yeah, bad day for the owner of the Buffalo Bills. With that said, it's a great job. I mean, that's the job, because you've got the quarterback. You are in a place where it matters a hell of a lot. Buffalo's fan base is legendary. The importance of it to Western New York, upstate New York, it's a big job in the NFL. It is, because of Josh Allen more than anything else. Sometimes it's best when you let the people who communicate for a living, and who, by the way, are intimately involved in running your football operation, to handle maybe the postseason presser. Josh Harris did not participate this year in that postseason presser. Did last year, didn't this year, and I'm not knocking it. I mean, Steve Bisciotti didn't talk for like 6 or 7 years. There's no requirement for the owner to speak, although public trust team is to a market. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to hear from the owner, but you got to prep the owner up a little bit better, a lot better. But I'm not blaming the PR people either, because it may have just been him riffing. Bad idea. John Keim next. So Brian Flores, as I mentioned at the top of the show, according to the NFL Network's Tom Pelissaro and Ian Rappaport yesterday, has signed a contract to remain in Minnesota if he doesn't get a head coaching job. So that crosses one hopeful off the list. It may have been a long shot, but certainly there was some discussion in Minnesota about the possibility. We had somebody on the show yesterday from Minnesota who said that there was a lot of belief in Minnesota that it was not a given that he would be back as the defensive coordinator, even if he didn't get a head coaching job. So he's off the list, but there are others getting added to the list, and John Keim is going to help us out with it. It's always good to have John on the show at John_Keim on X. Of course, he's covered the team from a beat standpoint longer than anybody has. So where are we? Like, I was starting to make a list, John, of all of the teams that need defensive coordinators.
Jeez.
I mean, this is an incredibly competitive situation for defensive coordinators. I mean, every head coaching job that's still available, they're going to need a defensive coordinator. And then you add Dallas, right? They haven't hired one yet.
Correct.
Green Bay, because they lost Halfley. Maybe the Chargers if they lose Minter. Maybe the Rams if they lose Shula. And then, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Cardinals, the teams that are still looking for head coaches.
The Niners just lost Salah.
And the Niners, I mean, so where are we right now?
So, and just as the backup to that, what's a hard thing for here is, like, let's say these guys, because Jeff Ulbrich would have been a guy that, had he come free from Atlanta, I could have seen him here for sure. And but because the first two names you'd always hear were Raheem Morris and Ulbrich. And, obviously Ulbrich is off the market because they're going to keep him. And then with Raheem, if they really want him, well, guess what? You have other people who know him very well as well, who have defensive coordinator openings. Like, he's coached with Matt LaFleur, and so I think
he's coached with Sean McVay if they lose Shula.
Coach with McVay, exactly. And so it's the same thing with, like, Mike McDaniel. And if they had waited for him, which would have been difficult because at the time, like, they thought he has a really good shot as a head coaching job. But he also, and I know he ended up going with Harbaugh, who he doesn't have a relationship with, but it's California, wife from there. I think that was a big factor. But he was also tight with Robert Saleh, like guys like that, where you knew that maybe just because Quinn has a relationship with them, others did too. Right. And they're a very good relationship. So that's, for this team, that's also what has complicated this. But when you look at, and then you have, like, the guys now are guys who are going to be up for multiple jobs. Jonathan Gannon, Patrick Graham, like those guys are obviously on that list. They talked to Joe Cullen. They talked to Carl Scott from Seattle, but he does not fit what they want in terms of experience, but he has a good reputation. And then they're going to be talking to Al Harris, who also does not fit with that because he'd be a first-time play caller. And, with Scott, I think it's more of a matter of, like, hey, he's ascending. With Al Harris, he's 51. Like, you have to wonder, like, why hasn't another team hired him as a DC? And why didn't Dallas want to, do that, right? So I think, like, you'd have to look at things like that. It's not just about being first time. It's got to be, like, you have those qualities. But it makes it Denard Wilson's another guy that they've talked to.
And he's an actual DC in Tennessee.
Correct.
Or was, yeah.
Was, right. So, they those are the guys, and, like, I don't know if more will be added to the list, because what happens if Cleveland picks someone who doesn't want to keep Jim Schwartz, or if they pick someone else other than Jim Schwartz and he says, I don't want to be here anymore, and so, like, does he become available, and is he a guy that you'd be interested in? I don't know. But that could also throw something in there. So about a week or so ago, maybe more, like, you'd hear it's probably not going to happen until at the earliest, the end of this week, and most likely next week. And that's definitely the timetable that we appear to be on.
Was Brian Flores a possibility or not? Because I do believe some of the stuff from Minnesota, that there was some stuff going on, and obviously I think they got it figured out. But if he had not gone back to Minnesota, was Washington a legitimate possibility?
Well, as I asked somebody here that question, the answer was he interviewed. So in other words, yeah. But I think with him, obviously he was looking at head coaching jobs. And then the other part, if just from a logical standpoint, he didn't have a contract. So you can help yourself. If you're going to go back there, help yourself by creating leverage. And not that he did it, not that he came to talk here just to create leverage, but it does create that. And if you're not going to get the head coaching job, help yourself get a better payday by creating leverage. And that's certainly, I think, part of what, he did here. Not that it's disingenuous. It's like for any job, like who doesn't want to create leverage? That's what's always best. But I think it would have been hard to get him away from Minnesota just because he knows the personnel there. They've been very good there. I think they feel, my understanding is like as a family, they're established there, obviously. So it would have been hard to get him moved, but I don't think it would be impossible. I mean, everybody's got a price. So I do think he was a possibility. I don't know how firm it was because, it definitely felt like they were waiting to see what happened with Jeff Ulbrich in Atlanta for sure.
All right, so let's go through the list and just tell me if
I forgot to throw on Raheem Morris on there. I know we talked about he's obviously on that list, and the other hard part with him, Kevin, is that he's again. I think he would Matt LaFleur. I'm sure if he wants to coach again as a DC, he's good with Matt LaFleur, and like you said, Sean. So like there are other spots, but there's also a wonder of would he rather go into TV this year and maybe wait a year or so to get back in it. So that's another complicating factor with him.
I don't know, if they're direct apples to apples comparisons, but I'll throw it out there and let you respond. In many ways, Mike McDaniel and Raheem are similar as it relates to the Washington opportunity. And that is, yes, Mike McDaniel and Dan Quinn are super close, but that never meant that Mike McDaniel would have taken this gig had it been offered to him,
right,
had he not gotten a head coaching job, which he didn't, because he's got there were very attractive opportunities,
right,
including Washington's. With Raheem,
right,
same thing. You just laid it out.
Right.
Yeah, Washington would be attractive, and he's got a great relationship with Quinn, but he won a Super Bowl with Sean. He's super close with Matt LaFleur. And in many ways, those situations, talent-wise, are much better than Washington.
Where would you rather go right now to coach defense? Green Bay or here?
Of course.
And I think one of the things, it's funny because throughout this process, Kevin, like I've talked to people, one of the things they ask is like, can somebody build a defense, or are you good because you inherited something? Here, you have to build it. And so, is that the best spot for all these coordinators? Like, give me a guy who has taken a defense and turned it around versus inherited and won something. So I think that's something you have to look at. But if you're Raheem, when you look at, again, here compared to Green Bay, look at the base you're starting with. Hey, you have Micah Parsons here, and over here you have what?
Well,
it's like and they have Edgerrin Cooper and Micah Parsons. You have all these. That's a good
loaded.
defense.
Loaded.
Yeah. So why would you? And if you want to become a head coach again, where is it going to help you most?
Yeah, all due respect to Dorrance Armstrong, two players are coming off injury. Which would you rather have, Micah Parsons or Dorrance Armstrong? No, I think what I'm building towards is the possibility that they're down to some of the early guys that they interviewed. A Graham. You and I both agree, and I agree with you that Carl Scott and even Joe Cullen probably aren't legitimate possibilities because Dan Quinn wants experience there. He's already gone the inexperienced route. So if you cross those two off the list, it's Graham, it's Gannon. I mean, he's still out there and he's good and he's experienced. Denard Wilson's been a defensive coordinator and people like Wilson and the job he did at Tennessee. Of course, they did have Jeffrey Simmons up front, who had one of the dominant seasons this year in the NFL. And then there's, his tree guys, Al Harris and Raheem, but Raheem may have better options. So who am I missing from the list?
Right now, nobody. And And Cullen he was a defense coordinator for 1 year, so he at least has done that.
Okay.
But, Scott would be the one to me that's intriguing as far as like, you don't know. And I've seen video clips of him, and I know of him, talking about installations on certain coverages and all that, explaining coverages to coaches. And it's like, he's really good. I don't know what that means as far as like his calling plays and all that, but he certainly comes across very well. And you don't know what he would do as a coordinator. And when you have two first-time coordinators, because you have obviously David Blau, inexperience in that role, and then if you have that, then like if you have one of those guys in experience, Quinn can help the other more, right? But if you have two that are inexperienced, what are you going to do? So that's a hard one. Gannon did very well in Philly, but again, like there was a lot there, that he worked with, but he also made it work. Like they had a terrific pass rush with him there. I think they had 70 sacks. But I know what I remember, and this is not like, I know the criticism of him in Philly. Now, this was a lot of Philly fans and the media and some other, like, he's not like necessarily an aggressive play caller, but that doesn't mean bad. Like you don't have to blitz to be aggressive. It's the way you disguise and do all those kind of things and simulate pressures, et cetera. But I just remember him, fans there they don't like coaches who don't blitz a lot. It's just Philly, right? But he has had success there. And Wilson, he's a guy that wants his corners playing up in press and being aggressive there. And Patrick Graham has had success as well. So they're not. Here's the other thing, Kevin. Like with this, they need to have better coaching, but they also need better talent to make that work. So whoever comes in is going to need that. But if you have just solid coaching, which you can clearly argue that they did not get that based on the changes they're making, then how much difference would that even make, even with if you add a few parts? Not to say that you can't add more, you have to have more. But my point is, like, can one of those guys who's experienced make enough of a difference to make them at least be respectable with an addition of talent, but obviously
it's one of the reasons that Brian Flores was so interesting to me, because he has consistently gotten more out of less everywhere he's been, including in Minnesota the last 3 years.
He was a guy that, like, to me is like, I love watching his defenses, not just because they are aggressive, because they do so much and confuse you so much. And when you watch, like when Washington played there, you watch that secondary they didn't have elite talent in their secondary. Harrison Smith is very good, but he's no longer what he was when he was in his prime. But yet, when it didn't seem to impact him, because what they did up front and the way they confused quarterbacks. Like, he would have been, to me, the grand slam, just because of what, like you said, like he was really good at picking guys and like, this guy would fit what I do well, and then making him into something. That would have been a terrific one. But he's not going to be here.
So
and that's why I say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, that's why I say, for this place, you have to be able to build a defense. You're going to have to do that. And like when I had Greg Williams on my podcast the other day, he was a guy, when he came here, took a defense that was bad and made it better. Who can do that? That's you have to look at the track record, not just of what they did when they had talent, but what could they do when you had to build something.
No doubt. I actually think that the last really good defense this franchise had was 2005, maybe 2007. 2022 wasn't terrible. 2022's defense was actually the reason that they were in contention more than anything else at the end of the year. But I wanted to ask you just about the current staff, because what if they exhaust themselves, and with all of the defensive coordinator openings, and all of them will be more attractive than Washington from a talent standpoint. Pretty much, Washington may have had the worst talent defensively in the league this year, especially after they started losing players. Would they ever turn to a guy like Ken Norton Jr.? Would Dan turn to that? He's been a coordinator multiple times.
Yeah. I have not heard that. I have not heard that. So I don't know. But the other thing is, too, in all this, is if you're So if you're, and this is another, I forgot to mention this earlier, but job security. So if you're a coordinator and you have multiple choices and you look at this situation, it's like, well, what is Dan Quinn's job security here? And would not have thought a year ago that we'd even be broaching this subject.
Right.
But after this year, like, and you look around the league and how quickly now some teams change, what if it doesn't go well next year? You know, what constitutes a scenario that puts him on the hot seat? And so if you're a Patrick Graham or a Gannon or whatever, and that's the guy you want, but they say, you know what, this guy over here has more security. You know, Matt LaFleur just got an extension. Like, this guy just got hired. So that, I think that plays into this whole situation as well, potentially, if you have choices.
My concern is this. You know how you and I have talked about this so many times, not to beat it to death, but you and I both know how false this narrative was about how Quinn was like, choice number 5 or choice number 6. He wasn't. He was way up on their list. Yep. But from a defensive coordinator hiring standpoint, we may get to choice number 3 or 4 here.
Right. For sure. Absolutely. And I
mean, how would you just take a wild guess as to their priority list right now? Like, who's the guy that they really want? Who's number 2? And then what's the fallback if, all fails on the true desires? Do you have any idea?
No, I don't. I think Raheem would be at that top because there's a familiar, clearly Quinn trusts him and, he's worked with him. And what I always say with that is, like, I would hope in any situation you're taking a guy not because you're familiar, but because you think he's going to make you better. And, I think after these moves, these were aggressive moves that Quinn made this offseason. So you would think that would be the priority for him. So, because you can look at the stats under Raheem and other places, like, but I think, but he's obviously has a good reputation, et cetera. So, and I don't say that to say he can't do that or he shouldn't do that. It's just that, you want to make sure it's about more than that, more than just that. So, but I would still put him at the top. I mean, he's, players like him a lot. They like playing for him, ton of energy, et cetera. But, it's still going to come down to, can you get a group to play discipline, execute well? It's like, I would just say this, play like Seattle. And I know that's hard because they have really good players, but I think for them.
Well, maybe that's why they like Carl Scott. He's coming off that staff. They were dominant this year. He's young. He's bright. But can you really, by the way, I don't think they should be concerned about this, about what we think or what the fans think.
No,
but,
no.
Going with 2 unproven coordinators, now look, we all knew Blau was going to be an offensive coordinator this year somewhere.
Yes,
so,
somewhere.
Even though some fans think it's a Hail Mary, it wasn't within league circles. But having 2 of those unproven coordinators in a year that the seat is at least warm would be interesting.
Yeah. It would be. And I think that's too where does ownership tell them, like, you can't go and say, like, oh yeah, you got 2 more years. Because what if it's a disaster of a year because of that? Well, then you have to make a change, but does this give you like an ability to, buy a little bit of time? I guess what kind of patience would be awarded in this situation if you went that route? Yeah. But I would say, like, to me, you'd still have to show improvement. You still have to show that it's working, because otherwise, like, why stick with it? But I also, like I said, I think clearly this offseason, it feels like the number one question a guy has to ask is he had a tight relationship with Joe Witt. Like, that was one of his tighter guys, right? And he was willing to demote him and then fire him. And so, like, and obviously Kingsbury, like, they're the parting of the ways there, and they different vision. And it would have been easy to say, like, oh, well, let's just see how it goes next year. But I think the question you always have to ask is, what is the best move for this organization? And if it is bringing in Raheem, then you bring him in, and don't worry, you know what I mean? Like, because I know people are going to wonder, like, is it because of this? But it's got to be because you think he's going to make it better. But everything to me starts with, and I brought up Seattle because, like, to me, it starts with being disciplined, and that comes back to teaching for in all roles. Like, this group was not only, you know, they didn't tackle well, they were, you know, misfit gaps and run front fits, right? So, like, all of that, like, that's when it's consistent like that, that's a problem, and that's not just on them, but you still have to improve the talent there. And I would want to know, if I'm a coordinator, what is your plan to improve this group? You know, you have cap space, you have a 7th overall pick. What is your plan here? That would be something that would be, you know, I would, number one, I'm going to ask, because, you know, when I talk to teams, Kevin, like, they would say, I had one coach tell me, like, this was the easiest defense they faced, and part of that was just they were decimated by injuries by this point, so that played into
and
that.
they were disorganized in part because of it.
But right, and what they were worried about, though, were the guys in the interior. So Kinlaw and Payne, like, those are the guys that they felt could disrupt things a little bit. So they need a talent infusion in addition to just somebody who can just be disciplined and tackle better, and that would go a long way toward improving.
You know, I'm just looking up Raheem's thing. First of all, I think over the last 10 years, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say anything other than, I love Raheem.
Yeah.
There's something about him that everybody in the business just loves.
I agree. Yep.
But do you know that not once, just in the traditional, you know, yards allowed, points allowed, yards allowed, he's only one time as a head coach or as a defensive coordinator had a top half of the league defense, and it was this year.
Right.
This year.
Yeah.
And in points, just twice top half of the league in points allowed. Takeaways, just 4 times top half of the league. And this year was the best year. You know, and they added those 2 rookies on defense who played so well this year for the Falcons. So it is interesting. He's just great with players. Everybody loves Raheem. But is he the best defensive coordinator candidate? I don't know.
And that's why I brought that up, is that it has to be because you think of this group he is the best, and not just because, like, I know this guy and I would, you know, I think, listen, that's partly why he went with Witt is, you know, I firmly believe that he felt like Witt was ready to be a DC. And then that's why the whole first time thing is like, I don't know that I want to go that route again. Right. And with Scott was, you know, Harris was a late addition to that. And, but I think with Scott is a little bit more intriguing just because of the youth of it. And at some point, you know, you're going to become a first time coordinator. It's just that, do you want 2 of them to be in that role? And like on the offensive side, you know, you have a new offensive line coach and a new assistant QB coach, which is fine. And new quarterback coach, but at least DJ Williams has been in that position elsewhere. So you have 3 guys going to be in new positions for them, and you want experience around them. I know Anthony Lynn has had it, Brian Johnson has it, but I wouldn't be shocked if they added like a senior advisor type who can help, you know, with game planning or whatever, right? You know, just kind of do, like they had that guy Jim Hostler a couple years ago under Rivera, somebody like that.
Do you think that's a possibility on offense? I've seen Darrell Bevel's name mentioned a bunch. Obviously, he's got a relationship with Blau and Quinn.
I do think that's a possibility. How firm one, I don't know, but I do think that's a possibility. Yes.
Okay.
And then that, you know, if you have that, then it allows Quinn to kind of to help. If you went with another first-time play caller, it allows Quinn to then kind of jump over there a little bit more. But you're still asking a lot, and that's still a big transition for a couple guys and a staff. And, you know, it's really going to make them intriguing going into next year. Like,
the optics of 2 first-time coordinators, but then requiring 2 senior consultants / advisors to come in. That's not a great look. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be the best way for them to go, but that's when you say, well, you better have gotten this right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly. So it does, and that's why I would say also go back to like, well, if you're Quinn knows that. So, you know what I mean? Like he knows that that's what the optics are going to be. He knows that if this doesn't work, I'm telling ownership, I'm telling these guys, like, this is the way to go. Now, this is not done in a vacuum either. Like he's not, well, he'll always use the word collaborative with like Adam Peters. All that. He's not going to just say, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's going to be like, this is what I want to do, and then bounce it, et cetera. But, if you're going to say like, this is the way, and with what I know with Josh Harris, you better convince him that this is the way to go. And because he's going to ask you, what about this? What about this? If you don't have answers to provide him to other questions, then you got to go back and rethink things. So this will be a thought out process, but he knows that this would be they're not dumb. Like he knows what happened this year. And like, so if you go into next year and it's like, if this blows up, it's done. And this would be his last chance as a head coach. Yeah. So you always have to keep that in mind. Like, this is a guy who knows that this could be what this means and what it looks like, and he's still going this route. Why is that?
I've got 15 seconds, but on that thought, I just wanted to end with this and just get you to confirm it or not. And that is, when it comes to Blau, it's different than the DC because nobody in that building disagreed with elevating Blau.
Correct. No, he's very well thought of, and I agree with that. Like he would have gotten another job if they hadn't acted fast. If they waited for Daniel, they may have been 0 for 2.
All right. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Of course.
Brad Johnson's going to join us next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. In 1999, Brad Johnson threw for 4,005 yards, 24 touchdowns. Our team went 10-6, went to the playoffs, actually hosted a playoff game against Detroit, and then lost an absolute gut-wrenching, heartbreaking divisional round game at Tampa, the team that he would, a few years later, lead to the Super Bowl. He joins us right now. It's good to have Brad Johnson back on the show. By the way, are you still doing some of those, wild things, basketball shots on TikTok? I haven't seen any of them recently.
Yeah, I actually took a little break this past 6 months. I think last year I did over 53 trick shots.
You did?
And so they took a lot of work to put together. And I think there's over 275 total of all of them. So I took a little break. I think I deserved it. So I'll probably get back into it as it warms up this spring. So it's been fun to put those together for sure.
For those that don't know this about Brad, Brad was as good of a basketball player as he was a football player. Played at Florida State when he was the quarterback there. I forget, how many years did you play? And which teams did you play on? Because you played on the first Florida State teams that entered the ACC, if my memory is correct. But were you playing basketball at that point or not?
Well, it was actually in football we were independents. A lot like Notre
you were an
Dame
independent, but weren't
football.
you part of the first team that came to the ACC?
Yeah, but every other sport in basketball, we were in the Metro Conference. So we were playing Virginia Tech with Bimbo Coles and Louisville with Purvis Ellison, Elliott Perry at Memphis State, South Carolina, Southern Miss. And so we had 2 years where we went to the NCAAs and got beat actually in the first round, got upset. We won the Metro 1 year. And so it was a lot of fun. And we're actually having a basketball reunion this coming weekend to honor Pat Kennedy down at Florida State. So I was able to play 2 years. Then Charlie Ward, he came in a little bit right at the end of my career. And then that was Charlie. They were the first ACC teams with Charlie Ward, Sam Cassell, Bob Sura, Doug Edwards. And that was a great team they had. So,
Rodney Dobard. I remember that
Rodney
dude.
Dobard, yep.
Because I'm a Maryland guy. So when Florida State came into the ACC, they actually came in and they were loaded those first couple of years. They were really good. Sura was amazing.
I think he had only one scholarship offer.
That's nuts.
Pennsylvania. And so he came to Florida State. He was he was special. Then had, I think, 11 or 12-year career in the NBA. And, oh, man, he was a special. But they made it the final 8. They were great. Golly, all those guys ended up playing in the NBA. So they were spectacular to watch.
Yeah, those were, up and down the floor, super athletic teams. I remember those teams. Well, it was weird because it's like, you don't want Florida State to come into your league knowing that they're going to dominate in football and then also end up having a great basketball team, which is exactly what they ended up having. But Brad was a phenomenal basketball player as well. So one of the reasons I was thinking about you and reached out to you is that, it's not apples to apples with Jarrett Stidham, but in the situation he's in, because you had played a little bit. But in 1996, that Minnesota team that you were on, that Warren Moon was the starter on and you were the backup for, was a really good football team. And Warren Moon went down fairly early in the season. You guys were like 5-1, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And you had to come in on a team that ultimately did make the playoffs, but there were even bigger aspirations when you came in. Tell me about what that's like and what Jarrett Stidham might be going through this week to sort of inspire confidence in his team that he can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for Jarrett Stidham. I hate it for Bo Nix, friends with his family, Patrick Nix, his father. And so it's just terrible the way it happened. But that's usually what happens in sports, and it's how people get the opportunity to play. I look at four Super Bowl winning quarterbacks that kind of came in at the late end of the year. Those guys were Jeff Hostetler with Phil Simms, Nick Foles with Carson Wentz, Bob Greasy with Earl Moore, if people remember the 1 year, and then Doug Williams did it with Jay Schrader. So they came in at the late end of the year, and then like a Kurt Warner, he came in early in the year when Trent Green got hurt in the last like preseason game. So like as a backup kind of guy, they end up taking off, and then your legacies are built on in the playoffs in January and February. And so my year that I had Minnesota with Warren, you know, I came in, he got hurt early in the year, and we were kind of back and forth a little bit. Then I made the run try to make the run in the playoffs. But when you're a guy like Jared Stidham, like he's only started, he's been in the league for 6 years. He's only started, I think, 4 games. I think his last pass was like 2 years ago, and I'm sure he's one of the fans, you know, a great teammate to all those guys, and he's played well in preseason, and he looks good, and you know, scout team on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and those kind of things. But now you're under the gun, like it's at the pinnacle of the season, you know.
Yeah.
So I bet he doesn't get reps, all season long. I bet he hasn't gotten reps. You know, and it's mental reps and maybe some reps after practice. And, you know, you sit there and watch the film and you say, I got it and I can do that. And then, you know, the thing about it, you haven't done that, you know. So we'll find out where his preparation's at. And, you know, I think the greatness of what's going to happen with him, he's with a great team, great defense. They're playing at home. The fans will be behind him. And Sean Payton's an unbelievable play caller and coach. So he's got everything in his corner. It just except he doesn't have that playing experience to just like be able to relax and make the critical plays. When you look at Denver this past year, they've had like 12 games where at some point in the game they've been behind, whether it's in the first half or the fourth quarter or whatever, and then somehow they found a way to win. They were ugly games that they won, and that's the greatness of Bo Nix, what he was able to do in some of those games. So, you know, Jared Stidham, he's going to be under the gun, and spotlight's going to be on him. So we'll see where he's at.
Yeah, it's interesting, the examples you gave, because I was thinking about, I saw the list last night. None of them are really comparable to this. I mean, you know, Doug Williams had been a starter, had led Tampa to an NFC title game. Greasy was actually the starter and got hurt, and Morrill came in, but was healthy then for the playoffs. Hostetler, you know, took over really mid-season or close to mid-season. For Sims, you know, we know the full story. He had a few games. This is really unprecedented. What's the most important thing for a Jarrett Stidham this week as he's preparing for the game to give, you know, Sean Payton and Cortland Sutton and Pat Surtain on the other side confidence that they can win this game with him starting it?
Everybody's just got to play. You know, out of the corner of your eye, you're looking at Jarrett. Like, is he ready? I'm sure these players go home. Their wives are saying, how's the quarterback looking? You know, the agents of these players are talking to him like, how's Jarrett? How was his week of practice? I mean, I'm sure behind, you know, in the huddle, it's been great. But I'm sure when everybody goes home, it's like, how's practice really going? Are y'all really ready? And so Jarrett, I mean, he's played a lot of ball, but he hasn't. And that's the thing. And I think the greatness of Sean, I really, you know, hopefully as a play caller, he cuts it loose. I think the more you pull back on quarterbacks, I think the more trouble it is. If you play too conservative, at times they're going to have to take some shots and change the field and those kind of things. So, I mean, last week their defense, they caused 5 turnovers against the Bills. So it's going to be you got a great team with you, but at some point Jared's going to have to make some plays. I think the play call and Sean Payton is going to have to cut it loose to let Jared just play the position also.
You know, he played at Auburn too, and was drafted by Belichick. Josh McDaniels brought him to Vegas when he got there as a head coach, and Sean Payton's first free agent signee was Jarrett Stidham. What do you think they see in him? These, you know, really good coaches. In the case of, you know, Belichick, McDaniels is an offensive guy, Sean Payton. What do you think they see in him that they really like?
Well, I'm sure he was a high recruit coming out of high school. He went to Baylor, then he went to Auburn. Yeah. And, you know, the draft pick, I think he's like the 6th quarterback or so in that class of, I think it's 2019 that came out. But, you know, he's a smart guy. He can make the throws, those kind of things. And Kevin, I always say the hardest part about playing the position is getting the position. Once you get in there, you can perform. But, like, you know, a guy in front of you, he was drafted, he's either making a lot of money that they can't replace him, or he's drafted higher than you, or you need someone to have an injury for you to get a chance to play, or just play really bad. So that's how I got my opportunity with Warren Moon. I would have never gotten a chance if Warren he had like 2 high ankle sprains. And then he was in a contract year. Then I ended up being a contract year too. So that was my advantage. But otherwise, you never get a shot. It's hard to get that opportunity. So that's where Jarrett's at. That's why I say if you've been in the league that long, you've played for 3 teams now, obviously you're very, very smart. You've been around it, but he just has to play. But the coaches obviously feel comfortable with him in the quarterback room, the impact it makes on the room and the team. And then, they think he'll be ready when it comes time. So, this is – you've been put at the top of the Christmas tree. You know what I mean? That's where you're at this week.
Yeah.
So it's going to be –
everybody's looking at that star, making sure it's not crooked.
Yeah.
You said something, and I've talked about this a lot. And this year in Washington, the backup quarterbacks for Jaden Daniels were Marcus Mariota and Josh Johnson at 39 years old. And Josh Johnson's been with like 37 teams. That's an exaggeration, but there's something about the Josh Johnsons and the Chase Daniels and, the Jarrett Stidhams where they're always employed and they're never considered to be a starter because they're not good enough, clearly, to be a starter, you would think. Why is it typically that those guys keep getting signed, keep making good money as a second or a third string quarterback, over and over again, despite no actual, real, legitimate regular season success?
I think the biggest part of the quarterback room is who's in the room, okay? Is there a bond between those guys, or is it controversy? There's a working relationship. Number one, when you, as a general manager, you might take a kid that's a little bit less in talent, but he's a great bond for that starter. He might be helping doing signals. He might be great in the meeting room. He might be a great teammate. That's a big deal when you orchestrate that QB room. And then, especially a guy like Marcus Mariota, okay, like his impact on Jaden Daniels is priceless. That relationship they had last year, they won a bunch of close games and it took off. And this year they just had a rough year, but like that impact he's had, that veteran leadership is a big deal. And so, and a kid like Josh Johnson, he can learn a system fast. And if he had to play without getting reps in practice, he's able to go out there and function. And I think that's a big part of in ways guys can keep their careers going because they've proven that they can do it. They can learn a system fast and they can function without getting many reps because there's just not many reps in practice, especially during the season. And then in the fall now, they don't do the 2 days like they used to in the off-season programs. You just don't get the reps like you used to get. So I think that benefits the guys that can learn system football without having to actually give as many reps.
So how was that quarterback room with Jeff George in it?
It changes the dynamics of the team. It does, And so
yeah, it did. You've talked about it before with me. Dan wanted Jeff George, and it screwed everything up in 2000.
Yeah, and you know what? And ultimately, Kevin, we got to take responsibility too. Like we just didn't either win, either pass or fail. And that was a team that went 8-8. I was 7-4 as a starter, and we didn't get it done. Throughout the course of the year with injuries and stuff that took place. But that bond that's in that room is who's the team looking at? Who's the owner looking at? Like it's a big deal to know who your quarterback is, and those kind of things. It creates controversy within the whole town, the stress on the team, those kind of things. So it's interesting who makes decisions.
How frustrated was Norv during those times? How frustrated was Norv during those times?
I actually did a podcast with Norv about a week ago, and so it's pretty cool to go back in time. And I had so much respect for Norv; is unbelievable. What's crazy, Kevin? He got fired with a winning record. I think it's the second time in the history at that point a head coach had ever been fired with a winning record. Like let us finish this thing out. We got it started. It just didn't. It didn't happen. And I give Norv credit. He took up for me for sure. And there's a great bond there. But I think when Norv came, I think the whole time it was just tough because, obviously they drafted, I think it was Heath Schuler at the time. And then they were going through stadium changes and ownership changes. Like it was just never a smooth transition the whole time that he was there. And but a hell of a coach and just I respect him so much and just enjoyed playing for him. And then obviously being, a Redskin at that time, the Commanders now.
Yeah. No worries here, referring to them or you as a Redskin, because that's what you were. One just quick question about Jeff George. Was he a great thrower? Like, guys that can spin it. How great was he as a spinner of the football?
Yeah, and I think what gets lost, Jeff and I were good friends. Jeff and I were friends, like we actually got along really well, to be honest with you. So that gets lost in the whole thing. But Jeff he was as talented as you've ever seen him. Just he could throw it with ease. Didn't feel like he ever had to even warm up or those kind of things. But he was a tough competitor, and he could spin it, and we got along well. It just didn't go. That season didn't go along well for our whole team. So, but he's an elite thrower. That's for sure.
I think about that season a lot because ultimately it led to Marty Schottenheimer getting full control, for one season the following season. And then Dan wasn't having enough fun, so he moved on from Marty. But, the game that cost Norv his job was the game that you guys lost to the Giants at FedEx. Yep. And Eddie Murray, who was, 40-something years old, the story goes, and you were there, that he told Norv, I can't kick a field goal more than 46 yards, and he put him out there for a 47 or 48 yarder for the win, and it came up like a yard and a half short. But there was at that point, Norv just said, hopefully you'll make it. Do you remember that game?
I do remember the game. I don't remember that statement. So
yeah,
but
9-7
was going to pick up. Yeah, it was
9-7.
Up, so
yeah, maybe 9-7, and then Norv got fired, and as Dion called him a year later, Terry Rabinski. Or that year, Terry Rabinski got the job. It was Terry Rabinski. Dion referred to him as Terry Rabinski. And that season, but you went on to great things at Tampa.
Year, so, yeah.
It was
oh my God. That year. It was just a crazy year. It had a special talent, but there was just stuff going on all the time, and we just didn't handle it the way you needed to handle it, and didn't get it done. So,
can you name the kickers?
I can't.
I got the list right in front of me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Eddie Murray,
I can't remember all.
Who, by the way, was 44 years old. The year started with Brett Conway because he was the kicker, in 99 when you guys went to the playoffs. And so it started with Conway, Scott Bentley, Chris Hepner, and Michael Husted. 5 kickers one season.
Yeah,
that's nuts.
I think there was more pressure on them in warm-ups than there was during games sometimes because they were.
Yeah. Real quick, we're talking to Brad Johnson. So back to last weekend, the Houston game in particular, and the just dreadful game that C.J. Stroud had. Houston's defense, I don't know if I've seen a defense like that in the last 10 years. It reminded me of your defense at Tampa. When you guys won at the Ravens defense in 2000. I'm curious, if you were watching the game wondering why they kept dropping him back over and over again.
Dropping what now? I'm sorry.
Dropping him back to throw over and over again when he kept throwing it to the other team.
Yeah. Those games, like CJ had a great first year. He's in his third year of his career. His first year, he set a precedent like, wow, this guy's doing it in his first year, And so I think the last 2 years have been just okay. But he's played good ball and all those kind of things. But then, you get these playoff games, and it happens every year. Honestly, if you go back and look at every playoff, every year there's one quarterback that's going to have 3 or 4 picks. It just happens. And there's a sense of you get in that last do or die kind of thing in the playoffs, and you force some throws that you shouldn't throw. You start seeing some things you don't throw with great anticipation, and just things happen. You'll get a tip ball here, there, and then things your thoughts get behind you. And I actually thought he handled throwing 4 picks in the first half. He actually handled the second half really well because there was talk of actually then bringing in Davis Mills at that point. Probably if he'd thrown another one, but it just happens. And you hate to say that, and he's a great quarterback. He's going to have an incredible career. And but there's just, it happens. It happened to me in my career, actually, in Philadelphia the year before we won the Super Bowl. And you just force things, and you just try to, it just gets away from you. And so it's just unfortunate for him. But you don't know if you ever get these chances again, especially with a great team, especially a great, incredible defense that he has. You just hope they can bring that back as a group again.
I mean, one of the reasons I bring it up is because you played with one of the great defenses of the last quarter century. The 2002 Bucks were the best defense, a dominant defense. You won a Super Bowl. Now, no one's ever talked about you that year in the same way they've talked about Trent Dilfer. You had a very good season that year, and the offense was good. But did you ever feel like with that defense, because you said they got to let Stidham let it loose, but Denver's got a great defensive football team. Houston, dominant defense. I think if they had punted 6 or 7 times in that game and just run the ball, they probably would have had a better chance to win. Did you ever feel during that season, I don't have to do a lot. I just can't lose the game?
No, I never thought like that. I actually led the NFC in passing efficiency, passing rating that year.
Yeah, it's over 60%. One of the first 60% guys. Yes.
Yeah. So you can't be a wooden Indian back there, or, just we're going to hand the ball off. Like, you got to play the game, but you also have to know who your team is at the same time. And so stats are really funny, Kevin. Like, so if you got to look at your play caller too. There were a lot of games where, just stat wise, and kind of going to it all, but like you might have 185 yards at halftime. Then if you have a lead, you might throw the ball for 40 yards in the second half, running the clock out. If you look at Troy Aikman, like, he didn't have as many touchdowns, because he didn't throw a lot of 3-yard touchdowns, because Emmitt Smith got them. So it's funny, how you lead your team, or did you lead your team, or the only thing that matters at the end is, are you winning the ring or not? And you don't win it by, just playing it safe. You got to play the game and then be smart at the same time. So you have to, obviously you got to eliminate turnovers no matter who you are. Then you got to be able to make explosive plays, and then just manage the game at some point. Like, that's the greatest thing about, I think that was the greatest thing about Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Drew Brees. They managed the game. And by that, saying, like, how good were they on first down? The first down is the most important. Everybody talks about third down. I'm like, first down is the most important down, because it makes the third and shorts and, those kind of things. If you look at the Rams, the greatness of their team is, like, if you do their drive charts, there'll be a first down, second down, first down, first down, first, second, third down. And so by that, I'm saying they don't run as many third down plays as the other team does, because they're so good on first down. So I know it sounds kind of confusing here on the radio.
No, I think it makes total sense.
Big deal.
Yeah, you'd rather make first downs on first and second down than have to make them on third or fourth. Understood. So how do you see these games on Sunday? Let's start with the AFC title game, because we've talked about Jared Stidham getting the start against the Patriots. First of all, what's been your impression of Drake May here in his second season in New England?
It's been phenomenal to watch. He plays with ease, completing over 70% of his passes, doesn't turn the ball over, makes a lot of plays with his feet, keeps drives alive, and you got to give so much credit. They put players around him. They really did, from offensive line to receiver standpoint. And then Josh McDaniels, phenomenal play caller. So, it's just been impressive to watch them this year. They were, I think, what was their record this year? They were 14-3.
Yeah.
Like, good gosh, Like, everybody said soft schedule, but, like, they are a fun team to watch. And Mike Vrabel taking over as the head coach. And that tells you what coaching is all about. Like, they were a disaster the last 5 years there with their quarterback decision making and who they had as the play caller, and now what they have going with Drake May and play caller Josh McDaniels. So I give them the edge. If Bo Nix were playing the way they've done it, I'd say they're the team. But you just have to put it back on how well New England's playing, and just the confidence that Drake May's playing with. I have to give them the slight edge going into Denver, even though it's on the road.
How real is the Denver thing? I don't know how many games you played in Denver, but how real is that, adjusting to the altitude?
I didn't really play that. When I went there, I was a backup, so I didn't really have to play and go through that. So I'm sure there's something to it. And then, not only breathing and all that kind of stuff, but I'm sure at some point, kicking those long field goals at times has been a big deal. So,
all right. What about the nightcap Sunday night? Seattle hosting the Rams, third game between these two teams this year.
Can't come fast enough. I mean,
yeah,
a huge fan of Sam Darnold, huge fan of Matthew Stafford. Love the way they both play. Sam Darnold's been, won over 28 games the last 2 years. Like, I'm excited for the kid, and hopefully he has a breakout deal and can make it to Super Bowl. And then both games, it was 21-19 the first time they played. The last time it was 38-37, I think, in overtime. But the difference was both games, the Rams had the lead, and they had to deal with some 4-minute situations. And so, to me, even though it's on the road, Seattle's got the best defense in the league. I just feel like the old man and Matthew Stafford is going to just pull out one more play, a little bit like what he did last week with the Chicago Bears. So, I can't wait for the game to happen. So we'll see it go down.
Who are your favorite quarterbacks right now in the league to watch?
Absolutely love watching Josh Allen. Sometimes it's a train wreck like last week, but it doesn't happen very often. But love watching him play, lead his team. Absolutely love it. Love what Lamar Jackson does. Obviously Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold. Big fan of Baker Mayfield, what he's done. Him and Baker and Sam Darnold, how they kind of resurrected their careers. So I kind of get into those kind of worlds of that kind of stuff, pulling for those kind of quarterbacks. So, and then obviously I'm good friends with Drake May's father, Mark May. Known him for over 30 years, and then
Carolina.
I've known Bo Nix, his father, for over 30 years also. We used to work at a football camp called Gus Purcell Football Camp in Charlotte, North Carolina, at Wingate College. And a lot of great quarterbacks, and that was where quarterbacks used to go before all these elite camp, before Elite 11, those kind of camps. It all came through what was called Gus Purcell Football Camp. So there's a history of a lot of great quarterbacks coming through there.
What do you think of Mendoza? Last question for you. What kind of pro is he going to be?
God, I love watching him. It's just, they were fun. They were fun to watch him resurrect, like Indiana, Kirk Sonetta. I think he's an elite processor. He's athletic enough, can make all the throws, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him if he goes to, obviously, the Raiders. It's a great division, but he seems like a kid. He's built for it. He's tough. He's smart, and can get rid of the ball. And so it'll be fun to watch his NFL career take off. But 16-0, it just doesn't get much better than storybook season, him winning the Heisman National Championship.
By the way, how are your sons doing? How Max was at Carolina, and then what happened after that? I lost track of it.
Yeah. There's this thing called NIL. So Max was not their NIL guy. They chose another kid there for their guy. And so Max is he's there last year at Georgia Southern, and he's 100% healthy. So looking forward to him having a big year, then coming out next year and be ready for the NFL. And then Jake, the tight end, he's at Auburn. So it's going to be fun to watch him go through the final year of college.
Thanks for this. As always, it's good to catch up. Great stories. Appreciate it. Hope you're well.
Yeah, appreciate it, Kev. Thanks, man.
Yep. Brad Johnson, everybody. Always good to catch up with him. When we come back, Max and I will give you our list of the top 5 players on championship weekend. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, our power ranking segment today is the top 5 players championship weekend. There are two ways to look at this: just flat out the 5 best players, or for this weekend, the 5 most important players. Because it's a different conversation, I think, if you're talking about importance. But I made my list of just the 5 players that I believe are the best 5 players that'll be on 2 fields Sunday afternoon and Sunday night. So let's go with that. You ready?
I am ready.
Okay. I think there are 4 players that should be in your top 5 if you're doing this. And then I think there are like 7 players or more that would vie for number 5 on this list.
Okay.
So I'd rather go 1 through 5 rather than 5 through 1. So
Sure.
we can talk about, okay. So number 1 on my list is Matt Stafford.
Ooh.
I think he's not only the best player on all 4 teams. I actually think in many ways he'll be the most important player on all 4 teams. But Matt Stafford is my number 1 best player playing on championship weekend.
So I kind of looked at this list as dominance at their position over the rest of the pack. So number 1 for me, Puka Nacua. He's had he got off to an incredible start of the year, and then had that little lull where he got hurt and was working back from injury. But dude, in these playoffs, he has been so damn good and so damn consistent. He's so big. His hands are great. He finds the soft spot in the defense. For me, number 1 is going to be Puka Nacua.
Can you hear me, Max?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
We should probably take a break because something just happened there in the studio, and I can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we take a break and we will come back? We'll do what we've done before, which is kind of reboot. Sometimes it's just rebooting, and then we'll continue with this list. All right, I think we got it figured out. Max and I are ranking our top 5 players championship weekend. I am going to have next hour a storm update. All of the new model runs are coming in. The GFS just ran, so I've got that latest information. The Euro will run next hour. So towards the end of the show, if you want my somewhat informed opinion of what the storm's going to do, I'll have that for you around 12:30ish, right around there. All right, so I had Matt Stafford as my number 1 player on championship weekend. You had Puka Nacua as number 1, correct?
Correct.
So number 2 for me is Puka Nacua.
Good.
I mean, it's a close call with Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, he's been arguably the best receiver of the season so far. Nacua is just an absolute force, and I'm talking about a physical force. He has the best hands. He has the best body. He runs the best routes, and he is so physically tough after the catch. Nacua is an absolute monster he's turned into this year at receiver. I think he is the second best player this weekend. Who's your number 2?
So my number 2 is going to be on the Broncos, actually. I got Nick Benito sitting at number 2 for me, just because he was leading in sacks at the beginning of the year. He's been playing really well. He just is going to get after Drake May this week. And that's the thing about Drake May, is that a lot of times he can run into those sacks. So getting that pressure on him is going to be huge for the Broncos this weekend. So give me Nick Benito at number 2.
I mean, Benito had one of the biggest plays of the game last week, that strip sack fumble, which, they really whiffed on the block. But we know how good Benito is. He's the one that broke up the 2-point conversion throw from Mariota Sunday night Thanksgiving weekend, when Washington had a chance to pull off a huge upset. My number 3, I'm going to stick at receiver and say Jackson Smith-Njigba, because it was close with Nacua, but JSN's been an absolute monster this year. He's literally been impossible to cover. Here's the thing about Seattle, though, in their last few games. You just take the 2 49er games, the Week 18 game, and then you look at the playoff game last week. What did they do? They ran the football. They ran the football with Kenneth Walker the third and Zach Charbonnet in Week 18, and then they really ran it with Kenneth Walker, 19 carries, 116 yards, 6.1 yards per carry in the playoff game. So Smith-Njigba, who had a ridiculous season, 119 catches, 1,800 yards, close to 1,800 yards. In his he got targeted 4 times. That was it in the playoff game. 19 yards, 1 touchdown, just 3 catches. I mean, the targets in the last 2 games have been, the lowest target number of the year in the playoff game, and 8 targets in that season finale was far below his average for the season. So he's still just flat out the top 3 player, in my opinion, on championship weekend. But I'm wondering if they're going to need him as much as they did during the regular season, or if they can lean on Kenneth Walker and the defense in this championship game. We shall see. But JSN's my number 3. Who's your number 3?
So my number 3 is going to be Matthew Stafford. You could put any of these 4 guys in the top 4. And kind of have somebody on the outside looking in at 5th. But Stafford right now, for me, he's the best quarterback left. He's got the most expectations on his shoulders. Him and Drake May are fighting it out for MVP. The votes are already in, but at the same time, it's still going to resonate in people's minds, just kind of how the results of this season are going to go. But so Matthew Stafford, my number 3. And then do you want me to give my number 4 since we've already just talked about him?
Sure.
Yeah. Number 4, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Again, his connection with Sam Darnold has been great all year. And he's a burner. He's going to get a lot of looks tomorrow night or Sunday.
So my number 4 is Nick Benito.
Okay.
So that's why I said, I think the top 4 players this weekend, I think most people would say Nacua, JSN, Benito, and Stafford in some order. Now, Pat Surtain, let's not forget, was the defensive player of the year last year.
This is where it gets tricky.
Kenneth Walker III is really good. I think he's incredibly underrated, and he really ran well in the playoff game and ran well in Week 18. Ernest Jones had a dominant game against the 49ers. Leonard Williams has been phenomenal for Seattle this year. Jared Verse, incredible for the Rams this year. And then there's Drake May. Drake May is easily this weekend the second best quarterback. I'd put him ahead of Darnold. I would. Like, if you give me the 4 quarterback options, and let's just say Nix was available, it would go Stafford 1, May 2. I like Drake May a lot, and I know that he has put the ball on the ground and has held it too long in these 2 playoff games. I mean, he could have easily been the GOAT in both of those playoff games. Now, they didn't really have any threat of losing the game against the Chargers. Their defense dominated the Chargers' offensive line and, by extension, Justin Herbert. But, 4 fumbles against the Texans, lost 2 of them. If he had lost 1 more, the one down by the goal line, that may have been the difference between winning and losing. So I'm going to keep him out of my top 5 because even though I love him and I think he could make some big plays that could be the difference on Sunday, he's been just okay. And they've been defensive-led. The Patriots have been a defensive-led playoff team. So my number 5 best player on the field, even though he's been banged up here and there and hasn't played well, but Pat Surtain is one of the 5 best players in these 2 games. And he's going to have to play like Pat Surtain on Sunday against New England. They're going to get that pass rush, but they can't let those quick throws. They've got to be disruptive up front, clearly, but the corners are going to have to play well. Mills and Surtain and company are going to have to play well. Surtain's number 5 for me.
So very interesting that you went with I went with a different corner at 5 that's going to be on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
Christian Gonzalez has had one hell.
He's on my list of others.
Hell of a playoffs. PFF got him 19 targets right now, 36.8 completion percentage allowed, no touchdowns, 4 forced incompletions, 45.3 passer rating when targeted. He's going to have to come up in some big spots this weekend, especially with Jarrett Stidham coming in at quarterback. So he's going to have opportunities to capitalize on some mistakes. So I think we're going to get a big Christian Gonzalez interception late in the game. And that's why I'm going to put him at 5. I think he's going to perform.
I had him on this list with Verse and with Witherspoon and Kenneth Walker and May. Neither one of us put May in the top 5.
It's the sack thing, man. It's the sack and the ball security. That's my big concern for him going into this game.
Yeah. Bo Nix would not have been in my top 5 had he been playing in this game on Sunday. That line keeps bouncing around all over the place. It was up to 5.5 and even 6s yesterday, and today it's back down to 4.5. Look, the bottom line is this game, even though people can say, well, Sean Payton's going to protect him, they're going to try to run the football, they're going to make it easy for him, their defense is going to lead the way, he can just kind of play a game where he doesn't have to lose the game. They're not Houston's defense. They're not. And I don't even think they're Houston in their ability to run the football. I actually think Woody Marks, had a really good game against Pittsburgh. New England's defense is nasty. It has become right there with Denver's defense, with Seattle's defense, with the Rams' defense in these final 4 games. Houston's defense, to me, was a cut above the rest of these because not only could they stop the run without loading the box, they pressured the passer without blitzing, even though they blitzed a little bit last week, which really seemed to confuse. New England did not look smooth offensively. With that said, they made some big plays. Like May made huge plays on 3rd down and the 4th down, the first one that went for the score, went for the touchdown. But I think this game is interesting. I thought for sure at the beginning of the week I was going to have Denver in tomorrow's smell test. I'm not so sure now because the sharp money's really all over the place. The bigger public play right now might be Seattle, and that number has gone up a little bit. There's sharp money on Seattle and public money on Seattle. Isn't that interesting, like, to a certain degree? Because the Rams in their last game, first of all, they went in as a 1-point dog and had a 16-point lead in the fourth quarter. They dominated Seattle through 3 quarters plus, and then all hell broke loose. And it started with Rashid Shaheed's punt return in that game. You know, I was reading something yesterday before the show, and I don't think I mentioned this on the show, that in that Thursday night game, I guess it would have been Michaels and Herb Street, right, on Amazon. I guess Herb Street said when Shaheed returned that punt return for a touchdown, he said that may have been the biggest play of the year in the NFC. Because if it sparks a comeback, Seattle's going to end up playing the next game against the Rams in Seattle. And it turns out he was right, because they were dead to right, 30-14. And by the way, 30-14 with 8 minutes left in the game. Shaheed's 58-yard punt return in that Thursday night game came with 8 minutes, down 16. And then they had, the next time they got the ball, they scored, and they had that wild 2-point, play where, the ball, it was an insane play. We've never seen that kind of 2-point play. The score is tied, and then the Rams had to miss a field goal at the end of the game with 2 minutes to go. And then the Rams took the overtime kickoff, went down and scored. And then Seattle came down and matched them and went for 2 again. 3 consecutive touchdowns with 2-point conversions to pull it out 38-37. If not, this game would be at SoFi. And there's a big difference, a massive difference. All right, when we come back, I've got a what do you got? And it deals with something that's fairly unique in our town. Get to that next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So my what do you got is a bit of a change in direction of topic. It'll be college basketball here for just a few minutes. Georgetown last night lost to Villanova at home. I'm sorry, on the road. And they dropped to 8-11 overall. And in the Big East, they are 1-7. Georgetown in Ed Cooley's third season on the hilltop, 1-7 in the Big East, 9-10 overall after a 66-51 loss to Villanova, Kevin Willard's Villanova team in Philly. Meantime, last night in Champaign, Urbana, where Maryland, by the way, had a 7-2 record playing at Illinois since entering the Big Ten. It's been one of those teams they have just owned. And Illinois had some really good teams. Maryland's had some really good teams in the Big Ten as well. But Maryland went down last night at Illinois, 89-70. Illinois is ranked 11th in the country, dropping Maryland to 8-11 overall and 1-7 in the Big Ten. Georgetown's 1-7 in the Big Ten, and Maryland is 1-7. Georgetown's 1-7 in the Big East, and Maryland is 1-7 in the Big Ten. We are in the midst of a truly unique season college basketball-wise in our town, because Maryland and Georgetown since 1979 have not had a season in which they have been both, where both of these teams have been this bad at the same time. There have been a couple of seasons that were close. A few years ago when Mark Turgeon left and Danny Manning took over as Maryland's coach, that was 21-22. Maryland went 15-17 overall, but they were 7-13 in the Big Ten. They were not good. It was the worst season they had in like 30-something, 40-something years. Georgetown that year was 0-19 in the Big East, and they went 6-25 overall. Maryland that's really the season you would look at and you would say they were both pretty awful. Maryland had a losing record, but not like what they're likely to have this year, in conference. 21-22 would have been that year. 23-24 in Kevin Willard's second year, Maryland went 16-17 overall. Georgetown was terrible that year. Maryland was 7-13 in the Big Ten. But we are in uncharted waters here because there have only been about 6 seasons going back to 1979 where both teams were not tournament teams. Pretty much the majority of the last 44 years, with the exception of 6 seasons, one of the two teams has made the tournament. Many of those seasons, both of those teams making the NCAA tournament. Neither one of them will make the NCAA tournament unless they make some sort of ridiculous conference tournament run. But I don't even know if they'll be in their conference tournaments because sometimes the last place teams, I think Georgetown, because the Big East is smaller, will be in the Big East tournament. I think it works where Maryland could actually be left out of the Big Ten tournament this year. It is really bad in College Park this year and really bad at Georgetown. Now, Maryland's got a new coach in Buzz Williams. They had to completely remake the entire roster, not part of the roster. All 15 players are new. He had to completely go out after he was named head coach and build a roster 1 through 15. I don't know how many times that's been done. Probably not many. How many times it's been done successfully? Probably never. But they're not very good. They actually played a good first half last night at Illinois, but they were still down 17. But through the first 10 minutes of the game was close. Yes, I'm still watching every game pretty much. By the way, congrats to George Mason. They beat George Washington the other day, 69-64, to get to 18-1 and undefeated atop the A-10 standings. They are having a great season. Tony Skinn doing a phenomenal job. But we are literally in a college basketball season here locally where Maryland and Georgetown are legitimately awful at the same time. And we really have never had that, where they both have been awful. Like, they both missed the tournament, like I said, 6 times. But usually in those seasons, one team was right there, barely missing the tournament, with a winning record. Again, 21-22 being the outlier, and 23-24 as well. But Maryland wasn't going to be many, many games under 500, and they won 7 games in the Big Ten. I don't know how many games Maryland can win in the Big Ten. I don't know if Georgetown was supposed to be better than this. Georgetown was supposed to be a potential NCAA tournament contender. They're at the bottom of the Big East. And yeah, they've had some close calls. They nearly knocked off third-ranked UConn the other day. More on that game in a moment. They nearly knocked off Creighton last week. Last night, they got beat pretty handily by 15 on the road against a Villanova team that has been surprisingly good, because they weren't supposed to be good this year. But part of why I wanted to do this as a What Do You Got was to, just mention how bad Maryland and Georgetown are simultaneously for the first time pretty much in 40-something years. And I'm talking about legitimately bad. But I've got to go back to something that we haven't talked about this week. Ed Cooley, in his 3rd year as Georgetown's coach, after their 2-point loss over the weekend to UConn, had the following statement in his press conference.
It's a lot worse happening than Georgetown losing a basketball game around the world, around our city, around our community. I'm not trying to deflect anything, but my appreciation and gratitude to have an attempt to coach these young men to be better at what we do is an unbelievable honor. Unbelievable honor. Yeah, we lost. Folks, wow, we're this, we're that. You know what we are? We're blessed. We're blessed to be 9-9. We're blessed to be 1-6 in the league.
Got a lot of attention over the weekend. Ed Cooley, after a loss that at that point dropped his team to 8-9 overall and 1-6 in the Big East, talking about, a lot worse happening. Everybody understands that. Around the world, around the city, around our community. Not trying to deflect anything, but really appreciate and have gratitude to be able to coach these young men to be better. It's an unbelievable honor. That last part, though, we lost. We're this, we're that. But you know what we are? We're blessed.
I'm not trying to deflect
be 9-9.
anything.
We're blessed to be 1-6 in the league. What'd you say, Max? Sorry.
I'm not trying to deflect anything.
Immediately after deflecting. That made me laugh, made me giggle. Sorry.
So I like Ed Cooley. I thought Ed Cooley did a phenomenal job at Providence. Actually, he was at the top of my list on coaches I wanted Maryland to hire when they had the opening and they ended up hiring Kevin Willard. I thought Ed Cooley did a phenomenal job at Providence, won 242 games, had a 613 winning percentage, had a 550 winning percentage in the Big East, and went to the NCAA tournament 6 times in his seasons, in his 10 seasons, 11 seasons at Providence. Got the team in 21-22 with Jared Bynum at point guard. Love Jared. Georgetown Prep got them to the Sweet 16. I've just always really liked watching Ed Cooley's teams. I thought he was an outstanding coach. At Georgetown so far in 3 seasons, he's 35-49 overall. That's overall. Usually at power programs, you don't have an overall losing record. You have an overall winning record because you have a lot of games you win in November and December to sort of build that up. He's 14 games under 500 overall. And in the Big East through 3 seasons, he is now 11-37. That's a 229 win percentage. He makes $6 million a year. I think it's $5 million base plus a lot more. It's a 7-year deal. And you can't say, no matter how correct he is, and by the way, Ed Cooley, I'm sure, is doing things that, help these young men develop as young men. I can't tell you that from watching Georgetown, I can't speak to the level of coaching, but I know he's a good coach. And I'm not sure what the reasons are that they have failed miserably so far in a season where I think it was the first in which there were some expectations that Georgetown could compete in the Big East, could end up being potentially an NCAA tournament team. I have no doubt that what he said is true and he really feels it. It's really hard to say that. It's very difficult, no matter how strongly he believes it to be true. And by the way, we've had Ed Cooley on this show a few times. He's a really good guest. He's an incredible communicator. You can tell one of the reasons, when you have conversations with him or when you watch him interviewed, why he's been successful. He can really pitch it. He can sell it. He's a great communicator. But when you're getting paid that much money and you've got big-time people in your program that are putting up big-time money for players, and you've lost 5 in a row, you can't say publicly, I'm blessed, we're blessed to be 9-9 and 1-6 in the league. I bet he even feels that way after the fact. It's not that what he said isn't true with respect to the larger things in life, the things that matter, but it's $6 million a year. Year 3, he's 14 games under 500 overall. He's 26 games under 500 in the league. This thing right now on paper has been abject disaster in terms of the final results. Year 3, this should be the year. And the sports landscape in college has changed, but Georgetown does have big-time NIL money. They have been able to spend on players. There is a belief that they've got some decent players. Hard to say that because of the way people who are close to it have invested in it. Not just, from a fan standpoint, but from a financial standpoint. It's tough to see your coach get up there after a loss and that dropped him to 8-9 or 8-10 and 1-6 in the Big East and say we're blessed to be, not 8-9, 9-9. He said so. He was 9-9 at the time, 1-6 in the league. that's not. I mean, at a basketball school, if you're a football school, basketball school, Georgetown's obviously a basketball school, as is Maryland. You get people that really care, and they're miserable right now. They're very frustrated. They're like, what happened? We thought we got the right guy. And in year 3, this might be the worst season. This might be what it was year 1. You can excuse year 1 as you're building, and they made progress last year. They had a winning record. They were 8-12 in the Big East following their 2-18 season. I like Ed Cooley. I'm not saying that to try to, position it as I'm not being critical. I'm being very critical. You can't say that. But I've actually been a huge Ed Cooley fan. Those of you that have listened to me know that he was at the top of my list for Maryland. After Turgeon departed, Danny Manning finished up the year. I wanted them to go get Ed Cooley. I thought he was an outstanding coach at Providence. And by the way, I'm sure he's still an outstanding coach. And there may be a lot of reasons as to why they are struggling the way they are. But hard for people who are super invested emotionally and beyond that to hear after a tough loss, hey, man, this doesn't even matter compared to things that are going on around the world. I'm blessed. We're blessed to be 9-9 and 1-6 in the league. Hopefully, they don't feel blessed to have lost by 15 at Villanova last night. It's funny because the Maryland-Georgetown thing, for those of you who know, has always been a thing. Like, even though they didn't play for a long period of time, there's always been, a very, very deep-seated rivalry. I mean, I'm not sure there's ever been a rivalry without playing as, emotional as that one was. Big John and Lefty, Big John and Gary, Georgetown's winning national championships, but Maryland's really good, but they didn't have their national championship. Then they got it, and Maryland was the dominant team. I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, in an area that is loaded more than maybe any other in the country. I mean, if you're part of that basketball scene in the DMV, you know that the top two dogs have always been Maryland and Georgetown. And they, you know the stories. Go back to John and Lefty getting after each other at the D.C. Armory in December of 1979, and then all of a sudden they're on ice. They're playing every year forever. They played later on that year in the Sweet 16 at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Georgetown won again, and the series went on ice forever. I mean, it was another 13 years before they played. Then they played in a Sweet 16 in 2001. And then Turgeon and JT3 got it together for back-to-back years. And Willard and Cooley, friends. And they put this thing together that started this year. We've got Maryland, Georgetown every year for the next several years. But, man, I don't know. I've not talked to the people in my life who are massive Georgetown fans. I should have. I reached out to my guy, CJ. CJ's like, part of the Thompson family and has been for years. I'd love to know what the reaction from Georgetown people are about those comments. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a phenomenal communicator. And I thought after watching them on opening night in College Park when they beat Maryland, I didn't know what I was watching because it's November basketball. But I remember coming away from that thinking they got some good players. Number 2, Malik Mack, and number 5, KJ Lewis are good. I remember that. I remember feeling that way about that team that night, and that, they got a shot this year. I mean, it's Cooley. You figure year 3, they're going to put it together. And by the way, they had a good early season win. They beat Clemson early on. Clemson's good. Clemson right now is a tournament team. They're ranked 18th in the country. They beat Clemson earlier in the year. But, oof, it's been ugly since. All right. Checking out these latest model runs for the Storm tomorrow. I'll have some of that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. If you've got any issues with your HVAC systems, my recommendation is Foley Mechanical. So we had some issues about 6 months ago. Reached out to Foley Mechanical. They were great. Dan Foley came out himself. He owns the company, dealt with us directly. He's super impressive. He owns 100% of the company. It's not a franchise. He controls everything, start to finish, the quality from the equipment to the people he hires, his team. They're professional, they're skilled, and they're sharp. Foley Mechanical is a full-service heating, air conditioning, hot water, and boilers company, and they're the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, a real specialty. This is the time of year if you're having any issues with heating, any HVAC issues, reach out to Foley Mechanical. They work across the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If your system needs help, do what we did. Reach out to Foley Mechanical. Ask for Dan himself. He'll come out. He'll take good care of you. Tell him that I sent you. Foley Mechanical at FoleyMechanical.com. Somebody sent me this quote from Buzz Williams after the game last night. I did not see this. After they lost to Illinois by 19. Quote, "This is good. We're taking these lessons and applying them not only in real time, but it's good information as we begin to build out." Look, I would not comp that to we're blessed to be 9-9. We're blessed to be 1-6 in the Big East. And Ed Cooley's in year 3. Buzz Williams is in year 1. Both of them have been very successful head coaches in multiple spots, but they're both struggling right now. But thank you, Joseph J, for sending me that Buzz Williams quote. I'm assuming it's true. By the way, I saw something this morning I meant to mention. The Houston-New England game on Sunday, which was an ESPN Disney game, became the most watched event in ESPN history. Nothing that ESPN has ever televised generated the number of viewers that the playoff game did Saturday in Foxborough. 38 million people watched that game on ESPN and on ABC. Pretty amazing. The NFL playoffs have been killing it. It just seems like there is never a moment in which the NFL isn't climbing, always climbing higher and higher in terms of viewers. It is the best reality TV there is. All right, so snow, if you care about what I think. And the only reason some people do is it's definitely a nerdy passion of mine, especially during the winter. I love following these winter storms. I like the meteorology around it. Not that I understand it like true meteorologists do, but I've said this before that it's actually all available on the internet. Like every model that you hear and you see now on social media with the amount of snow and the kind of weather, it's all available for anybody. It's public information. You can run the models when they come out yourself. And honestly, it takes maybe like an hour to figure out how to read them and how to kind of decipher them. Now, there's a lot more to forecasting for a real meteorologist like a Doug Kammerer at Channel 4, and hopefully we'll get Doug on the show tomorrow. And there's something that I think is the most underrated part of sort of TV meteorologist forecasting, and that is when you're on the spot, like all of them will be, this week, and then when the storm starts, the actual blow by blow and what they call nowcasting. All right, we're done with the models. We're done looking at computer models to tell us what we believe is coming. Now we see it. It's in front of us. And now we got to tell you whether or not it's going to turn to sleet or freezing rain and where it's going to happen and how much longer it's going to snow and what's the intensity. That's a skill that those guys have acquired over a long period of time. And for me, in many ways, that's the separator. When I watch some of these guys, I think Doug's very good. I think Doug is excellent. I think Topper's pretty good too, but he is. Doug, has this love for the big storm, and it kind of comes through, I think. But that's where you go from the model watching phase to the nowcasting phase once the thing is on the verge of starting. So these models, people ask me, they actually ask me. I'm like, I don't know, but I do know. What are they? They're simulations of what the weather is going to be, throughout the United States, throughout the world. And there are so many of these computer simulated weather models, forecast models. The ones that most of the meteorologists depend on are the Euro. It's actually a European run computer simulation of what the weather is going to be. There's an American model called the GFS. There's another American model that's much more short term. It's called the NAM. And then there's a Canadian model, there's a German model, there's a UK model, and they all kind of come together in these big events where everybody's looking at all of them. And they're not all exactly the same. Like that's where, on your weather app, which I would not pay attention to these weather apps, the Apple weather app or Weather Bug, where you're seeing like 28 inches of snow, on your weather app. They're just not right ever. I don't even know how they come up with some of the stuff they come up with. But you'll see on social media, what they call digital blue. It's like the digital printout of how much snow there's going to be. And it's, snow is usually represented by the color blue. And, one model will show, oh my God, we're getting 2 feet. But another model perhaps said, 8 to 10 inches. And that's where the challenge comes. And with the meteorologists, it's like, which models do I trust? Which models do I trust from a distance, longer term, medium range, shorter term? Which models do I trust when it comes to big storms and how they handle certain features? And that's what those guys know. People like me who just have this as a hobby and just look at all the models. I mean, sometimes your memory of how models performed previously comes into play. But that's what they're doing. Like they're doing things that everybody has access to, and they're interpreting it. And then starting, tonight and tomorrow night, especially on Saturday, you get into more nowcasting. That's a true skill that those guys have acquired. But I would imagine, and I think Doug told us this, that he's going to put out his first snow maps tonight in terms of what's expected. Before I get to, the latest on this, I expect it to change a lot. Like I expect whatever the forecast is today, tonight, even early tomorrow, because you're still 36 hours prior to it beginning, that there to be a lot of, there will be a lot of changes. Sometimes those changes are the changes, that are the difference between a lot of snow and nothing, or a lot of snow or a lot of rain, or a lot of snow or a lot of sleet or freezing rain. This one is really pretty much locked in terms of, we're going to get a massive storm. Basically, it's going to cover, half the country and impact 100 million plus, people from Texas to New England, more likely than not now. It's locked in that we're having a big storm. Sometimes these storms are like, we think there's going to be a big storm and it's going to develop off the coast and ride up the coast, but then it develops off the coast and goes out to sea and you don't get anything. This one is here. It's entered the United States. It's trudging through, the western, southwestern part of the country. It's going to go through Texas and Arkansas, and then it's going to start moving north and northeast, towards this, the southern states, the mid-Atlantic, and we think eventually, based on the latest, indications, to New York, New Jersey, New York, and then New England after that. So that's what appears to be a given. Like, it would shock everybody. And by the way, it would really be a bad stain on meteorology and these models if this storm just petered out, or stayed super south and it was just rain and maybe some ice for some southern states, a little bit of snow, but like the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast got completely hosed and didn't get anything. That really doesn't look possible. It's not impossible that it could happen. Excuse me, but based on the model runs right now, that seems impossible. So I think number one is this. It's going to be very cold. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be all snow, because it's what the temperatures are at every layer, every part of the atmosphere that matters. It can be 15 degrees on the ground and you could be getting freezing rain or sleet and not snow because of the upper levels of the atmosphere are warmer. And that's where, there's some thought that that's going to take place. Certainly south and east of the city, but the temperatures during this storm, which now looks like it'll start maybe a little bit earlier than people were saying yesterday. It wouldn't surprise me if snow breaks out Saturday evening, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. And there's also an indication that the storm may not exit until a little bit later, like Monday morning. So you're looking at, a 24 to 30, 36 hour event. That's a long duration storm, super long duration storm. But it's going to be cold, and it's going to stay cold for a while. I mean, I was just looking at the GFS, the run that just came out, which takes you 384 hours ahead. I mean, a couple of weeks ahead. And the cold just doesn't leave us. It doesn't leave us. And there's another pretty sizable storm in the long range for next weekend. And then there's other opportunities following that. But the one thing that is definitely going to be the case after today and tomorrow is we're going to be below freezing for a long time. And if we get above freezing, it's probably going to be in the mid to upper 30s here or there. I think next week it looks like, especially if there's snow cover, we're not going to get out of the 20s. And at night, it's going to be in the single digits. And I'm talking about for people that live in the city or near the city. Like it'll be 10, 11, 12 degrees. And if you're in, Potomac or Rockville or Great Falls or Ashburn, I mean, it'll be single digits and even approaching zero. This is what's different about this kind of setup for the next few weeks. Usually we have a big storm and maybe it's cold for a little while, but then you get some sort of warm up. There's no warm up on any long range forecast right now for the next 2 weeks. So it's going to be below freezing and significantly below freezing throughout this storm. The issue is at the mid-levels of the atmosphere, will it warm up and change an all-snow event to a mix event? And the indications are it will, especially for DC points south and east. Right now, where it stays all snow, it's a foot plus and maybe as much as a 1.5 to 20 inches. Where it stays all snow. It could be that all of us in the DMV get an all snow event, but the lean now, if you take sort of the consensus of the models, is we're going to get 8 to 12 inches of snow, somewhere in that neighborhood, across the immediate DMV. And then certainly in the city points south and east, it will mix with sleet, more so than freezing rain. There's a possibility of freezing rain. That's the worst. That's the rain that freezes, and then power lines and trees and tree limbs, and then that's what you don't want. And that's what they're going to be dealing with south of us, for sure. You don't want freezing rain. Sleet is the hard sleet pellets. That doesn't stick to anything. It'll weight down the snow accumulation, but it's not going to stick to anything and cause power outages and tree limbs to be down. Freezing rain does that, especially when it's freezing rain and the temperatures are in the teens and 20s. Yes, it can rain in the teens and 20s. It's just freezing rain because it freezes on contact. But that just means the upper levels of the atmosphere are above 32 degrees. And there's a possibility of some of that. But I would say DC, city, immediate suburbs, Virginia, Maryland, moving north and west. I'd be surprised if we end up with any less than 8 inches from when it starts Saturday evening, Saturday night until Sunday morning to maybe early Sunday afternoon. And then you get into, is it going to mix? probably does in the immediate metro area and definitely south and east. And it'll mix with sleet and maybe very much so south and east freezing rain. But where it stays all snow, upper Montgomery County, moving out to Loudoun County and beyond, and then Hagerstown and all of those places, I mean, a foot to a foot and a half minimum. I mean, 20 plus is on the table. So if it stays all snow for us, that's on the table. Of course, all of this subject to change. So there you go. The GFS showing a lot of snow, but some mix. The Euro's actually running right now. And I am looking at it right now. And yeah. It's kind of where it's been. Same kind of idea. A lot of snow, longer duration event, but definitely some mixing when we get to, certainly Sunday, late morning, early afternoon, and then through Sunday night. So as you're sitting there watching the games on Sunday, there should be more likely than not a lot of snow on the ground, but maybe for some of us, I live in the city, and in the immediate is you'll have a lot of sleet, and it could be very heavy sleet. Like the sleet could accumulate to a couple of inches. And then what you don't want is you don't want the freezing rain. That's the stuff that creates, true kind of bad situations. And because it's going to stay so cold for so long, it's not like it's going to melt and it's going to be easy to fix power outages if we were to get those, because it's sunny and 48 the next day. It's not going to be 48 until February at some point, maybe March, with the way we're going. So we got real winter to deal with for the first time in a while, although last winter was pretty harsh. Not a lot of snow, but a lot of cold. All right, there you go. Tomorrow, Doug Kammer will join me on the show. And, I'm saying that. I asked him, but I know he's going to be super busy. So hopefully he can make some time for us. And we'll have the last forecast of the week for what should end up being the biggest snow we've had here, certainly since 2019, where we did have a 10, 11-inch snowfall. And probably 2016 which was the last absolute, hammer on us, where we had pretty much 20 to 30 inches throughout the area. I don't think 30's in play, but 20 plus in some areas is probably in play somewhere where it stays all snow. Okay. We got more on the show. I do want to tell you, by the way, if you have older windows, you're paying too much for your heating bills. This weather update brought to you by Window Nation. They're offering 4 free windows with every 4 you buy right now, and you don't have to pay anything for them for 2 full years. So if you go to 866-90Nation, you call them, you mention my name, you can go to windownation.com and do the same thing and schedule your free in-home estimate. Maybe they could get out there tomorrow or sometime on Saturday before the snow starts. They're not going to get your windows in before this storm, but maybe they'll get them in before the next storm, next weekend. So call them and take advantage of a company that provides you with A, great product, B, a great deal. Buy 4, get 4 free is basically half price. Not paying anything for 2 years, you're benefiting with better utility bill situations without ever having paid anything. And then they are just the best when it comes to dealing with customers. 45,000 5-star reviews. They were rated number 1 in America by Forbes magazine among all window installation companies. 96% of their installs require no follow-up service, and they offer you a lifetime warranty, so there's nothing to lose. If you've been thinking about new windows, my big ask is just give them a chance to come out and give you an in-home estimate that's free of charge and will be scheduled for you when it's convenient for you. Call them at 866-90Nation or head to windownation.com. This from Dennis. Dennis writes, I did not tune in to hear 20 minutes of weather talk.
You're going to get it.
You got it today. You might get it tomorrow, Dennis. This from Shad from DC. Shad, the haiku master. Sheehan is so good. He's not just a forecaster. He's a five-caster. Thank you, Shad, for that. Very much appreciated that. What's funny is that weather is a major driver on local television for ratings. It's pretty much the only reason people watch local news anymore. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it has for years been the highest rated part of a local newscast. Let's face it, all due respect to all the guys that are doing sports, local television, just isn't what it used to be because everybody has sports right there on their phone. They've got the latest stories. They've got the latest updates. There's ESPN. There's all of these different places in which you get sports, including local sports. I mean, the golden age of local sports television in this town was, first of all, it started with Warner Wolf as the Channel 9 sportscaster in the 70s. Warner became a national personality, when he went to New York. He eventually came back to DC, actually, in the late 80s, early 90s, actually, after Glenn Brenner passed away. But during the 80s, when Glenn Brenner was at Channel 9, George Michael was at Channel 4, Frank Herzog was at Channel 7, and Steve Buckhantz was at Channel 5. That was the golden age of sports on television, local news sports. There's that somewhat famous for people in the business, but the San Diego Super Bowl, the 87, Super Bowl, January of 88, when Washington was playing at old Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego against Denver with Doug Williams at quarterback. Steve Buckhantz was able to get everybody together on the set. George and Glenn, I think they respected each other, but they weren't super close. I'm not sure anybody was super close with George. But George, Frank, Glenn, and Buck all on the set together. And Ernie Bauer would get this story right if I don't get it right. But Brenner said at some point, if a bomb goes off, Harvey Smilovitz is going to be the most popular man in town. But Harvey Smilovitz was Bernie Smilovitz's brother. Bernie did sports forever at Channel 5 and has been at Detroit, in Detroit doing sports television now for a long period of time. We had Bernie on last year before the Lions playoff game. God, it was great to catch up with him because he was really super popular for sure in town. But you don't have that anymore. And, news is gotten in so many different ways, not locally. Now, you do have much more of a local news angle when you tune into local news, on 4, 5, 7, and 9. But it's weather that people really tune in for because it's so, personalized to neighborhoods and, in towns around the area. And so it's still a big part of local news. It's probably the thing more than anything else that saved local news over the last many years. So there you go. I do see now all of the, off of the Euro coming in pretty much similar to the GFS. Everybody seems to be going with, kind of that 8 to 12 over the DMV, much more north and west or more north and west. And there's going to be some sleet and freezing rain, more likely than not on Sunday. We'll see. Sleet mostly. Freezing rain, though, south and east of us. What else did I have? I had something else that I wanted to mention. The NFL MVP finalists have been listed. And there was a player on this list that surprised me. The final 4 players for MVP, the finalists, if you will. Christian McCaffrey is on the list. Josh Allen is on the list. Drake May and Matt Stafford are on the list. These are the 5, actually, that have made it as finalists. And Trevor Lawrence is on the list. Did Trevor Lawrence have anywhere near an MVP season this year?
I think the Jags were just good.
I know they were good.
Well, and
they were good in.
Yeah, he's reaping the benefits of it, is what I'm trying to say.
I get it. I'm looking. I mean, he threw for over 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 picks, got sacked more times than any other year in his career. I still think Trevor Lawrence has a chance to become a great player, but those are the final 5 candidates for MVP. And I certainly expect it to come down to Drake May or Matt Stafford. And I'd be surprised, honestly, if Matt Stafford didn't win MVP. He is the favorite, correct?
I believe they're kind of neck and neck. The odds have been shifting around. I believe Matthew Stafford is currently the favorite, but Drake May's not far behind him, like plus 150 or something.
I mean, I'll tell you what, Coach of the Year, Vrabel, Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald, Liam Cohen. There are some choices for Coach of the Year. Hell, Kyle Shanahan, what he did with his injuries, probably the best coaching job anybody did this year. Defensive Player of the Year, it's got to be Myles Garrett, right? Although I would guess Will Anderson Jr. is in the hunt.
He if you set the sack record, you're going to win DPOY. Like that's just kind of how it goes.
You have to. Myles Garrett is truly one of the greatest players of this century, the last 25 years, and it stinks for him that he's been on one horrible team after another. All right, who's up next, Chris or Toby?
Rooster is back in the building.
Chris is back. We're back tomorrow previewing these championship games, picking them, smell test as well, and we'll, have some weather talk. Sorry, Dennis, on tomorrow's show as well.